Hey everyone, Egman here with another video. Before we start this topic, I want to say that the card of the week this week is going to be Chomp the Trickster, or pretty much any of the counterplay rares that came out of last set. They're all super cheap right now. Like Mox Speed's like dang, or a cent, right? Which the Cruel I guess is a little bit more expensive, but chose this one. I think it's really underrated and just does a lot. It's really just a better Mutaito. So if you guys want to get that, it's super easy. Hit the link below. Also, just in general, TCG players doing an 8% bonus bucks until I think the 28th, so like Thursday. So if you want to jump on that, I would appreciate it. It helps support the show. And yeah, let's jump on into the video. In the beginning, there was Cold Bloodlust, and also Crusher Ball, but mostly Cold Bloodlust. Yes, we are talking about counterplay skills. They're a little bit... one, they're getting a little bit more reinvigorated with all new cards coming out. I think Bandai is making a lot of good changes and kind of making it more interactive in that sense with these cards. I think they printed this card in set 1, and they're like, man, we can't, we don't ever want to make a counterplay again until we change some stuff up. And so they did, like limiting this to 1, and also like getting rid of my Achilles zone and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're going to talk about how these counterplay timings work. And I wanted this to be a resource for people who are a little bit confused on how everything boils down and all that. So we're going to start with Cold Bloodlust and maybe a little bit of history. So pretty much how it used to be is that Cold Bloodlust could stop anything. It doesn't matter like what part. It used to be that it could stop anything at any time. It had the ultimate control over. It was able to see anything your opponent was about to play, and you can just play Cold Bloodlust right before it hits the field, and then it's negated, right? Which means your opponent would, generate a lot of resources, or use a lot of resources to get something big out, and then for 1 yellow energy, you just completely fizzle it. So, which is obvious with a card like Perfect Force Cell. If you don't know what this card does, it's kind of like the OG Gogeta. You're able to reduce your opponent's hand to 3, but you could get this baby out on turn 3. So, which was insane for a really long time, and so because of that, Cold Bloodlust was a really popular counter to it. And just the idea of what you use this 5-drop, which you can get on turn 3 with the 3-drop. You say, oh, I put this Android 18 under it, and then I get this out for free from my deck. And then what you used to be able to do is you just Cold Bloodlust when your opponent says they're playing this guy, and then that's it, right? You lost 1 card advantage, and you spent probably your entire turn and 3 energy to do this, and then you just countered it for 1 yellow. So there is that, and then you also get to keep your hand. So what Bandai did was that they changed how the counter timing works, and pretty much there are 2 timing windows. The first one, it's weird a little bit in the sense of it depends on how a card is played. So if you play a card, hard cast it with this like 5-drop here, let's say you pay 5 energy, there's only 1 timing window for it. What you do is you pay it, you show the card you're playing, and then your opponent's response is saying, oh, I just played this 1 yellow energy and do that, and then that's it, right? It's either they have a response or they don't. And they changed it for cards where we're gonna say like Shoot Gash, this 5-drop, or also like World Peace. All these cards are effects that summon other cards, and so how this works is that there's the first timing window when the effect activates, and then the second one when it resolves and the card hits the field. So and there's a little bit of kind of leeway or just particularities of how these work. So let's say we're playing, so like the most common example when this new ruling came out or these new timings worked is that, let's say you have this 5-drop here. You say, I put an Android 18 under it, do you have a response? And so your opponent could say, oh, I Cold Bloodlust here. And if they do, then that means that the card that this brings out fizzles. So if they bring out a 7-drop, it fizzles. And then that's it, right? No more effects from there. Or you could wait until it does come out, and then you could still play Cold Bloodlust. However, if you use the second timing window, that means that this still gets its auto when this card is played effect, because when negating a card's effect doesn't mean autos that are pending are negated. It's a little bit of a weird corner case, but it really just means you can't negate stuff just by blowing up, like, when you have like a card that swings in when it has an auto and your opponent like Shocking Death Balls or something, the auto still resolves because it went into pending. And in this game, if an auto goes into pending, it doesn't get negated. I don't think it ever gets negated. It just always resolves because it's on the stack pretty much. So there's that, and so you're probably wondering, oh, so why you would always do it on window 1? And so for this really specific case, that probably doesn't matter anymore. What you can do is say, okay, I play Android 18 under here with the Uni Absorb, and say response, and your opponent says, aha, I cold bloodlusted. And so from there you can say, let me see, oh, you know what, I get to choose up to one of these cells, so I'm going to choose 0. So that all resolves, this fizzles, and then after that you're saying, you know what, I'm going to try again. So I'm going to put this under here, say activate effect. Assumedly your opponent won't have a response anymore, and then so you just play this, 7-drop perfect force cell, and then you decimate your opponent's hand. So that's kind of like the power for that, and it goes through these other cards as well. So there's like Shugesh and also World Peace. World Peace is a really important card because this can get a huge array of cards for your opponent, and just the idea of saying, oh, okay, so I play this, and then if you have a more kind of diverse card where like even if you play it, this is stretching a little bit, but let's say you play it and you have 8 energy, so you can get this guy out. So this card's unaffected by your opponent's deflect, or it has deflect, right? And what deflect means is that it's not affected by your opponent's counterplay skills. We're going to go back to it because you can get around this with counterplay, weirdly enough. But the idea is that, oh, you can play this, and then if I did cold bloodlust it randomly, then it doesn't get affected. But if they would have chose like perfect force cell or something like that, just the idea of giving your opponent the option of, oh, do you spend an energy blindly to activate cold bloodlust or any of these, or do you take the risk of seeing what I can bring out and see if you can handle it like that? So really big thing there, and just that's kind of how the 2 timing windows came around. It's a little bit confusing, but once you get used to it, it makes a little bit more sense. So after that, that's enough cold bloodlust. We're going to talk about the other counterplay cards, and so we've got cards. So one more card that's kind of like this cold bloodlust and crusher ball that can be activated at both timing windows is this Frost Deadly Poison. Being able to play this card, it's kind of like the crusher ball and cold bloodlust had like a baby, and here it is, but for a lot more energy. But still, I still think this is a great card. But we've got this card here, and then we ended up getting. It took a really long time for them to make like another counterplay card that kind of made sense, and we've got like these cards. I don't know if there's like just pretty much these 2-drop counterplays. And really, for these things to be relevant, we had to get rid of minus Killy Zone, which is super funny. The fact that minus Killy Zone was around and it was almost strictly for cold bloodlust was hilarious. It's just super funny to me that they made a card for almost like a silver bullet strictly for cold bloodlust, and it didn't really affect anything else. But so the idea is that these guys, they're 2-drop extra cards that say any sense of both of these guys target something that's 4 or less, and then this is just 20k or less. So that's really important for, and also the thing about these cards is that, I'm going to just read Preemptive Strike. If your leader card is green and the battle card your opponent is playing has an energy cost of 4 or less, it is placed in the owner's drop area instead of being played. So with that wording, that means that this card is only working on the first timing window. So you can't play a card. So that kind of, I think, balances it, but also gives some interactivity. So let's say like a really similar situation of where, okay, this is going to be kind of, oh yeah, okay, here we go. So let's say you've got Preemptive Strike, right? And you think, oh, you know what, they're going to get out their Explosive Spirit Sengoku. So with World Peace. Right, the law setup. So you play World Peace for World Peace, and then you have 1 counter timing for your opponent, and so you can choose to say, okay, I'm going to blindly World Peace, or Preemptive Strike whatever you World Peace, and so that means that this doesn't come into play if they were to choose this card, but if they were to choose this card, then this would just fizzle, right? So you just spent 2 energy for nothing, and so there's a lot of like gameplay and just analysis where you have to be, okay, can I lose 2 energy? Is it worth using 2 energy to prevent this, or preventing like this 3-drop Goku coming out? That kind of stuff just brings in like a lot of kind of mental like thinking of the game. That's mental thinking of the game. What a stupid sentence. Who came up with that? But so these are pretty much how these cards work. You only have the counterplay window for 1, so that means that if let's say I wait till counterplay window 2, and then they drop this bad boy on there, then oh, guess what? It doesn't. This just prevents it from being played, and timing window 2, it's already played, so you've missed your window, so you can't activate these cards. So that goes with that. Also, just a quick side note: Counterplay gets around barrier because it's before the card's in play, so barrier isn't active yet. It's a really niche ruling, or not niche. It's a really kind of interesting ruling, which is really why they made the card text deflect, because they're like, oh man. I feel like they tried to make barrier to get around Cold Bloodlust, and then they realized, oh, we made barrier wrong because Cold Bloodlust can still be played. All right, let's give deflect out, so Cold Bloodlust can finally be a little bit ranged, which was the same set they put out minus Killer Zone. So they obviously were just really trying hard to get rid of that card from relevance. So there's all that. So that's how those counterplays work. And then we've got the little bit more interesting one, the multi counters, as I'm calling them. And also Mutaito, because he's technically multi-counter. So these cards are special because they have counterplay timing, but they resolve at auto speed. So what that means is that it's kind of in a sense to think about it. You play this when they're at the counterplay timing, and then you activate their autos. So let's say your opponent is playing. Let's say they just hard cast this guy, right? Hardcast Explosive Spirit Son Goku. Then you play Champa in response to it, and so what that means is that this card hits the field and then goes from there. And since it hits the field, you're able to your opponent activates their auto first. So they say, okay, I activate Goku's auto to blow up something up in rest mode, and then use Champa to put the card being played into rest mode. Or you choose a card and you ignoring barrier and you put in rest mode. So you can put this in rest mode if you want, right? And so that's a really interesting thing. I feel like for these guys, yes, they can be really flexible, and all of them kind of do like two things at once. But the idea is that you play them, your opponent gets to activate whatever skill they're wanting to, and then you can bounce them back or blow them up or what have you. Which also means, so that the interesting thing for this is that these cards get around deflect, because I'm gonna read deflect real quick. Deflect says this card is not affected by counterplay skills, right? So the counterplay for these cards, what the actual counterplay skill is literally just putting this card in play. It literally reads counterplay, play this card. So the counterplay ability is not affecting this card at all. It's the auto that goes off to do this. So that's why Mutaito and Champa can be really good ways to mitigate like Height of Mastery, because they play Height of Mastery. They put it. Then you respond to it with your Mutaito or your Champa, and then they activate their auto. So they put 3 things in rest mode, and then you activate your auto and put it in rest mode yourself. So that's how that works. It gets around deflect, but the opposite for let's say this Vegeta the Cruel, right? In a case where if your opponent was to hard cast this Explosive Spirit Son Goku, you could preemptive strike it, and then since it's counter timing window 1, your opponent barrier is not active yet, so preemptive strike goes off. This has less than it's energy cost 3, which is less than 4, so this goes right into the drop area. The reverse is that you could say, oh, in response will play Vegeta the Cruel, and that means that this card still gets in the play, and since it's in play, you can't use Vegeta the Cruel's ability to pick it with barrier, because barrier is now active. So since this is effectively on the field, barrier is live, and that means you can't choose this Goku with Vegeta because its barrier is active. So it puts it like a lot of interactivity there, and some choices of where, okay, what's more important to me, just blowing up a card in general, or being the flexibility of having this guy, which is also a body, just makes some good deck building challenges. And the best thing I think is that not one of these I feel is dominant. There are situations where preemptive strike is better than Vegeta the Cruel, and vice versa. I think it just adds a lot of mentality to it, and just is great for the health of the game, making people choose one when one of them isn't best, and just kind of gives people an access to be who knows the meta better and which one's just more important right now. So I think that's it. Hopefully that kind of helps you guys out with counterplay timing. I saw a lot of people kind of tripped up with this. I really should have made this video like 2 weeks ago, and I just didn't. All right, you figured it out. I didn't, but hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, please answer below. And also, I probably should have said this earlier too. If I made any mistakes, there will be a pinned comment in the comments below to help you feel better about whatever confusing thing I said. But hopefully that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.